video a week later because of Roe v. Wade. Please do check that out if you haven't seen it already. And so, yeah, I am tentatively back. I say tentatively because Rossi does still have a massive recovery journey ahead of him, as you'll see from the special little intro I made. I've put together pictures and videos of when he was at his worst, to literally just today when he's finally started again, running up and down the stairs. He managed to jump on the couch earlier. He's not jumped up on the bed, even though that's lower down. But yeah, he is gradually making a recovery. I feel like I've mentioned like little bits in various videos, and so this video is going to go from the start and then I'm going to piece it all together. I'm going to move the microphone and move the camera because Rossi's on my knee at the minute, and I'm just going to do a video where I give him some gentle strokes, and I'll tell you about everything that's been happening in the past, what month are we in now? August. So the past 2.5 months. I'm hoping the microphone is okay where it is. Apologies if the sound is a bit quieter in this section of the video. I've just had to put it somewhere, which happens to be like right in front of me and onto the table I record on. So you may notice that Rossi is looking a little different. You see here, and around his eyes, and around the other side of his face, here and here. You can't really tell, but along his spine as well, you'll notice that he is looking a lot less muscular than he has appeared in my previous videos. Now, that is not because Rossi is malnourished, it's not because Rossi is underweight. I'll get onto it in a bit. So, towards the end of May, we noticed that Rossi was a bit more tired than he normally was. He didn't seem his normal self. I'd noticed that he wasn't really stretching out. Rossi's one of those dogs where he wakes up on a morning and he just stretches out of his bed, and then he just does big long stretches, and he wasn't doing those big long stretches. He'd injured his back paw pads at doggy daycare, and I'd said to John it might be that, but also I've had a Google and it says that can mean that they have some sort of spinal pain, but I was like, I'm not going to trust a Google diagnosis because, you know, Google diagnoses are never normally 100% accurate. So I put that on my mind, but then he began limping at the start of June on the Jubilee weekend, and we had to have him to the emergency vet because we were concerned at this limp, and also the back of his leg was swollen. I'd actually got him an appointment to see his normal vet on the Monday, but we decided to take him to the emergency vet on the Thursday just because all the other vets were closed, and it was just concerning us that he had this limp and this swollen leg. The emergency vet said his temperature's a little high, but it could just be that he's a dog that runs a little hot. We'll give you some Metacam since he's in pain, and just see a normal vet on Monday. If you've got any concerns, call us. So the Metacam seemed to make, if for those who don't know, Metacam's like a doggy painkiller. It's like a non-inflammatory treatment. And so yeah, that did nothing to ease his pain, so we went to see his normal vet on the Monday. At that point, I believe he'd infection. He's obviously got an infection in his leg, that's why it's swollen. So they started him on some antibiotics. They were just some broad spectrum antibiotics. They were like, it's probably just an infection in the joint, this will clear it up. The antibiotics did nothing, so we took him back again later that week, and they prescribed him some different antibiotics that would treat a different type of infection, and these seemed to work. The swelling in his leg came down, and he seemed a bit more himself. Sorry, I'm just so not used to speaking to myself, so if I'm tripping over my words, I do apologise. It's just been a long time since I've recorded. So, where was it? I guess the swelling started to come down, and we're like, brilliant, he's finally on the mend. But then, when the antibiotics were due to finish, he had a check-up and his temperature was still up. The vet was like, not to worry, his immune system might have been given the kick it needs to sort out this infection, so we'll stop the antibiotics, we'll see how he gets on. He still wasn't really eating, he was eating more, but he still couldn't really regain weight, and then he just declined again, and he started with diarrhea, so we got him back to the vets. He went back on the antibiotics, and he just didn't seem to really improve. He still had this fever, he still wasn't eating, the infection in his leg seemed to clear up, and he had several blood tests and these showed an elevated white count. So his body was fighting something. Then the vets basically said, I think this was like the end of June-ish, or maybe mid-July, because this infection wasn't getting any better, he would improve, and then his blood test would show there was still an infection. So the vet's like, you've got two options. You either go to the Weir Referrals Animal Hospital, or you try these high-risk steroids. They were like, we'll get you a quote for Weir Referrals, because when I took out Rossi's insurance, I took out like a limited policy. Well, it was like the premium level cover, but his vet fee coverage had like a maximum coverage amount, which was quite low, because in my mind I was like, he's a young dog, he's fit and healthy, Jack Russells aren't prone to any congenital health problems, so it should be fine. And I was very conscious that based on what we'd spent on antibiotics and blood tests, we were near that limit. So we decided to go with the high-risk antibiotic, and that did seem like it was clearing things up. He was running up and down the stairs, he seemed a lot more himself, he started eating again, but then he just very suddenly, after about a week on these antibiotics, after he'd been continued on them for a little bit longer, because the vet was like really glad to see that he was improving, but she'd done a blood test and his white count was still up, his fever was gone. So we're like, right, he's heading in the right direction, brilliant, we'll carry on the antibiotics just to kick it. And then he just relapsed again, he stopped eating, he was just lethargic again. At this point, like, me and John were just in tears. We didn't know what to do for him, we were worried because we'd been given a quote from the animal hospital, and we were like, how are we going to afford this, because we're literally going to be out of pocket for this. They'd suggested some tests that they wanted to run, and it was going to come to £4,000, which was money neither of us really had. But in the end, when those antibiotics stopped working, we had two options, which was start steroids or just like, go down this route of the referral hospital. And I was like, you know what, we're gonna have to do it. It's cancers. And so I managed to get the money from somewhere to cover the fees, and like, our vet has been absolutely amazing. She called me on the Friday to say, did she call me on the Friday? Yes, she called me on the Friday to say, this is the quote from the referral place. Do you want to definitely go down this route? And I said yes, and she was like, okay, well, I'm going to give them a call right now, and I am going to speak to them because they've been really slow with referrals lately due to staff shortages, so I just want to make sure that you get seen quickly. And I was like, okay, no problem. And I was expecting that I would maybe get a call like on the Monday or something, or maybe if I was lucky over the weekend. I wasn't sure if any office staff there worked over the weekend, but no, I literally got a call from them that Friday night saying, can you bring in Rossi for Monday morning for some tests? And I was like, brilliant, yes, that's fine. Took him in on the Monday with my daughter because she's been staying here this week, and met this really lovely vet. Like, she was so super lovely. She reminded me of one of mine and Jordan's friends, actually, because just the way that she was. And she looked at Rossi and she said, well, the two things that your vet thinks it is they think it could be an autoimmune condition, or they think it could be meningitis. And she was like, but based on what you've said of his symptoms, I don't think it's meningitis, because she'd asked me whether he had one of the main symptoms of meningitis is neck pain. And dogs with meningitis tend to keep their head down because it hurts them to move their neck. Yes, I'm talking about you. And I'd said to her, I was like, well, we have noticed that sometimes when we pick him up, he is kind of making like, he's grumping. But we're not sure if it's just because he's just so sick of everything that he's been relaxed and we've moved him and he's not happy. Like, he's not, he doesn't seem to be massively in pain. It sounds more like an annoyed grunt than an in pain grunt. And she was like, well, I don't think it's going to be meningitis. I think it's likely going to be this form of arthritis where the body attacks the joints. So we'll do some fluid sampling from his joints, and we'll confirm all of that, and then it'll probably be a case of him going on steroids. And she did mention, like, you see, I mentioned the muscles around here. She was like, oh, that muscle atrophy that he's got there, where his muscles have just gone, that will come back once we start the treatment on the steroids. Now, that's important, and I'll go back to that later. To be honest, me and Jordan, like, we hadn't noticed this like boniness around his face, and we were both under the impression that it was because he was losing so much weight because of not eating, that like he'd just lost so much muscle mass. Rossi was 4.8 kilograms last time he was weighed at his yearly check. At this point in time, the last time he was weighed, he was down to 3.9. Now, that was when he was starved, because he had to be starved before he had a general anaesthetic. But it's a lot of weight for a very small dog to lose. But yeah, she said that he would have some tests and he would have a neurological exam, but they were fairly sure it would turn out to be this disease that was just something that was attacking his joints. And she was like, I can see that he's kind of tapping his toes as he stood there, which makes me think it is that. And also because of his first symptoms being this pain in his back leg. Like, in all honesty, I think because he started with this pain in his back leg, everyone, including the vets, including us, got sidetracked with it must be something in the leg. And maybe missed a lot of other things or overlooked a lot of other things. Though, like I said, the vets have been amazing, and the only reason we got seen as quick as we did was because Jan, our vet, just called them and got it pushed through. So I do owe our vet like a bottle of wine, a card, whatever. I'm gonna get John to drop it off after he's back, because he's in Rhodes at the minute. Anyway, they said that if he had to start the steroids, he would be in overnight, and he'd be gone for a couple of days, because they like to monitor them if they put them on a steroid trip, just because their temperature can spike and stuff like that. And I was like, yeah, absolutely fine. They called me that afternoon, and the vet was like, so Rossi has a lot of symptoms that are really exciting our neurology department, so we want to put him in for an MRI scan. Now, the MRI scan was the thing that I was like, anything but an MRI because of the cost. I'd covered myself for extra on the fees, just like in case, but I was like, oh god, this is going to get really expensive. But yeah, the vet basically, sorry if you can hear my stomach, the vet was like, he has neck pain and he has pain in his tail. He has just been very good at hiding it. And he must be in absolute agony, but he's really not showing it. And the vet was like, he is such a good dog. When we've been moving his head, when we've been moving his tail, even though it has clearly been causing him a ton of pain, he has not bitten. He has just like growled and maybe given a little warning, but he has not bitten. And I said to him, I was like, I've had Jack Russells in the past, and in my mind they all seem to experience pain differently, and it's always been of my opinion that Rossi has a very high pain threshold, and she was like, yes, I agree. Anyway, we got booked in for the Wednesday morning with the neurologist for the MRI, and got a new quote for how much they thought it was going to be, because the neurologist was like, I'm going to do the MRI, and I may need to do a muscle biopsy as well, just to confirm my findings. If we have to do a muscle biopsy, then he'll be staying in overnight, because we like to keep him in overnight if they have a muscle biopsy. But anyway, I took him on the Wednesday morning. Ray absolutely loved the dog hospital because there was a ton of dogs. All of the staff thought she was amazing because she kept telling them all how she was going to be a vet. She just, was loving being there. So she had to go in her pyjamas on the Wednesday because the appointment was at like 8 AM, so it was pretty much the time she'd gotten up. So we went on the Wednesday, dropped him off there, and I have never phone watched. Actually, I was going to say I've never phone watched so much in my life, but I really did. Like, it got to about 3 o'clock, and I was like, why haven't they called? But anyway, they called at about, I think, 3:30, and the neurologist was a lot less chatty than the other vet that he'd had, and she was literally like, I will see you at this time for his discharge. And I was like, oh, okay. But I was like, I guess they found something, because she did mention that he may be discharged without a diagnosis. But anyway, I was like, they must have found something if they're not saying anything. Maybe they prefer to say in person. Anyway, we got there, and the neurologist led us into a room, because it was still me and my daughter, because I've got like Rossi, here and here we've got inflammation, and she was like showing me the areas of the muscle and explaining it all. And basically the neurologist explained that he has meningitis, which is an autoimmune disease which can be treated with steroids, but they also found a disease called polymyositis. Now, polymyositis is generally another autoimmune disorder. It can have a number of causes. It can be an infectious cause, so she's done blood tests to rule out the two most common causes of that, which are toxoplasmosis and Neospora, but those tests take a little bit of time to come back. It can also be caused by a cancer, but she said, I don't think in Rossi's case it is a cancer. I think it is just either autoimmune or infectious, because why have one autoimmune disease when you can have two? So Rossi is now on steroids for at least the next 6 months. He's on antibiotics until they confirm otherwise. If the tests for the toxoplasmosis and the Neospora come back negative, they'll probably be like, okay, this is an autoimmune version of polymyositis, so he's going to need to be on steroids and immunosuppressed long term. But he's been given antibiotics for at least 10 days. The antibiotics are also really weird. He has to have 3/4 of a tablet, which is a nightmare. He has to have blood tests and a physical examination in 2 weeks' time to see about lowering his dosage of the steroids, and then he'll have to have a full physical examination and more blood tests every time, just to check that his body's responding appropriately and that he can have his dosage reduced. He can't have routine vaccinations. I don't know how long for, because the letter said I would not recommend routine vaccination for the next years. So I don't know whether it was meant to say year and it's a typo, or whether there was meant to be a number of years. Is one thing that I need to check with the vet when Rossi goes back, because like I said, he'll be back in a couple of weeks, but he gets to go back to his normal vet for any blood tests and stuff as well. But this time I was like, I'll just get it done at the referral place. The bill actually came to less than what we were expecting. I'm not sure how much the blood tests are going forward, but I think they're only looking for one specific marker based on what I read in his notes. So I'm hoping that means it's the cheaper in-house blood test that they can do, rather than it being the one where they have to send it away and do a full panel. But at the end of the day, I think that £250 every couple of weeks isn't too, or every few months isn't too bad. They also suggested a form of chemotherapy for him that would reduce his steroid usage quicker, because being on steroids long term can be quite bad for them. But the chemotherapy was going to be thousands, and there was loads of other things. After the chemotherapy, you've got to avoid their urine and their faeces for at least a week afterwards, and double bag any poo, and he can't be near anyone that's immunocompromised and stuff like that. Which would mean technically he wouldn't be able to go near or go to Jordan's parents, because Jordan's mum is immunocompromised, so they wouldn't be able to look after him. And given that he can't have routine vaccinations, unless we got someone who was only going to sit him, isn't really an option. He probably can't go back to doggy daycare because they want all the dogs to be vaccinated, and also, given that we're suppressing his immune system, I would be so worried about him picking anything up because he's going to be so much more prone to any infection now. You might be able to see the bald patch on the back of his head. That's where they took a sample of his spinal fluid, and that's where they confirmed his diagnosis. And the other thing that the neurologist told me was due to the infection being polymyositis, any muscle wastage that has already occurred, unfortunately that will never come back. So the way she explained it was, it's better to have an alive dog, though less aesthetically pleasing. To be honest, I think Rossi is still very cute. Yes, you're still a cute boy. Cute grumpy boy. So he's always going to have like these sunken cheeks and sunkenness above his eyes from now on, because the muscle fibres have been permanently damaged. But honestly, hopefully this is it. Hopefully we have no relapse. If he does relapse, it'll be a case of chemotherapy for him, as well as the steroids, or a higher dose of steroids. But I'm just glad that hopefully all of this